The year was 2247, and humanity had finally reached beyond its own solar system. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance watching the stars through the main viewport. His crew of 200 men and women worked quietly at their stations. They had been traveling for 3 weeks searching for the source of a strange signal detected by deep space probes. Jake was a tall man from Texas with short brown hair and sharp blue eyes. He had served in the space fleet for 15 years after starting as a fighter pilot. Now at 42 years old, he commanded one of Earth's most advanced exploration vessels. Behind him stood his second officer, Lieutenant Amy Preston, who was checking the sensor readings. The signal grew stronger as they approached the edge of human-controlled space. It was unlike anything they had encountered before. Amy looked up from her console with concern on her face. She told Jake that the signal was not natural and appeared to be some kind of broadcast. Jake ordered the crew to slow down and approach carefully. Then everything changed. Massive ships appeared on their sensors. There were dozens of them, and each one was 3 times larger than the Defiance. The alien vessels formed a wall in space, blocking the human fleet's path. Jake had brought 5 ships with him, but they looked like toys compared to these giants. A transmission came through. The communications officer played it on the main screen. The image showed a creature that looked like a mix between a lizard and a man. It stood over 7 feet tall with dark green scales covering its body. Its eyes were yellow with vertical pupils and its mouth was filled with sharp teeth. The creature wore armor that seemed to be made of black metal. The alien spoke in a language humans had never heard. The computer worked quickly to translate. The voice that came through was deep and commanding. The creature identified itself as General Vexthar of the Zalthari Dominion. He said that this sector of space belonged to the Dominion and had for 3,000 years. Jake listened carefully. He had hoped that first contact with aliens would be peaceful. Vexthar continued speaking. He said that humanity had entered Dominion space without permission. This was a violation of their laws. The general paused and then delivered his demands. Humanity would submit to Dominion authority immediately. Every human world would send tribute to the Zalthari each year. The tribute would include valuable resources, advanced technology, and a percentage of human industrial output. Zalthari overseers would be placed on Earth and all human colonies to ensure compliance. Humanity would also provide soldiers to serve in Dominion military forces. Jake felt anger rising in his chest but kept his expression neutral. He asked Vexthar what would happen if humanity refused. The general's face twisted into what might have been a smile. He said that refusal was not possible. Species that refused were conquered and their worlds burned. He had destroyed 12 civilizations in his career and would not hesitate to make humanity the 13th. The commander asked for time to take these demands back to Earth's government. Vexthar denied the request. He said there was nothing to discuss. Humanity had 1 solar cycle to begin sending tribute. The general ended the transmission and the alien ships disappeared as quickly as they had arrived. Jake immediately ordered the fleet to return to Earth at maximum speed. The journey back took 2 weeks. During that time, the crew was tense and quiet. Everyone knew what they had witnessed. Humanity was not alone in the universe, and their new neighbors were not friendly. They arrived at Earth, and Jake went straight to United Defense Command headquarters. He reported everything to Admiral Lisa Grant, who was the head of Earth's military forces. Lisa was a stern woman in her 50s with gray hair and dark eyes. She had served in 3 wars and never backed down from a fight. Lisa watched the recordings from the encounter 3 times. Then she called an emergency meeting of Earth's government leaders. Representatives from every nation gathered in the Global Council chamber. Jake played the recordings for them. The room fell silent as they heard Vexthar's demands. The reaction was explosive. The Chinese delegate stood and said that China had not fought for its independence only to surrender to aliens. The American president said that the United States would never pay tribute to anyone. The European Union representative agreed. The African Federation leader called the demands an insult to all humanity. One by one, every representative spoke. Not a single voice suggested accepting the Zalthari terms. Humanity had spent centuries fighting for freedom and democracy. They had overcome wars, diseases, and environmental disasters. They had united as a species to reach the stars. Now someone was trying to take it all away. Admiral Lisa Grant stood before the council. She said that Earth needed to prepare for war. The council voted unanimously to reject the Zalthari demands and authorize military mobilization. Within hours, the order went out to every human colony and space station. Shipyards went into full production. Factories that made civilian goods were converted to produce weapons and ammunition. Scientists began developing new military technologies. Volunteers lined up at recruitment centers. Humanity was getting ready to fight. Meanwhile, a classified meeting was taking place at a secure facility. Admiral Grant had called in Commander Brandon Cole from the Navy Special Operations Division. Brandon was a legend in military circles. He had been a SEAL for 20 years and led countless missions. He was 40 years old with a scarred face and cold gray eyes. Lisa told Brandon about the Zalthari threat. She said that conventional warfare might not be enough. They needed someone who could think differently and hit the enemy where it hurt. Brandon listened without expression. When she finished, he asked what she needed him to do. The Admiral explained that intelligence was critical. They needed to know everything about the Zalthari. Their military strength, their technology, their weaknesses, and their homeworlds. Brandon would lead a classified mission behind enemy lines. His job was to gather information and, if possible, cause chaos in Zalthari territory. Brandon accepted without hesitation. He said he would need a team of the best operators available. Lisa told him he could have anyone he wanted. Brandon began making a list in his mind. He knew exactly who he needed. Back in orbit, construction had already begun. Civilian ships were being fitted with weapons. Mining vessels carried missiles. Cargo haulers mounted railguns. Every human in space was preparing to defend their home. The Zalthari expected submission, but they were about to learn something important about humanity. Humans did not kneel to anyone. Commander Jake Morrison returned to the Defiance with new orders. His ship would be part of the defensive fleet forming around Earth. He gathered his crew and told them what was coming. He said they had a choice. Anyone who wanted to leave could transfer to a safer assignment. Not one person left. Lieutenant Amy Preston checked the weapon systems personally. Every missile was loaded. Every gun was ready. She thought about her family back on Earth. Her parents lived in California and her sister had 2 children. Amy had joined the fleet to explore the stars and discover new things. Now she would fight to protect everything she loved. General Vexthar had given humanity 1 solar cycle to comply. That time was almost up. The Zalthari expected a message of surrender. Instead, they were going to receive something very different. Admiral Lisa Grant prepared humanity's response. It was short and direct. Earth would never bow to tyranny. The Dominion could leave peacefully or face the consequences. Humanity chose freedom over slavery and would fight to the last person if necessary. The message ended with a simple statement that would echo across the galaxy. You wanted tribute, but all you will receive is fire. General Vexthar returned to Earth's orbital space with confidence burning in his chest. He commanded 200 warships and carried orders to force humanity into submission. The Zalthari had conquered 40 star systems in their long history, and humanity would be just another name on that list. His fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel near Jupiter and began moving toward Earth. What he saw shocked him. Humanity had built a massive defensive line. Nearly 400 ships waited in formation. Some were military vessels, but many others were converted civilian craft. Cargo haulers carried missile batteries and mining ships had been fitted with railguns. Orbital platforms bristled with weapons. Every human vessel was positioned and ready. Admiral Lisa Grant stood on the bridge of the carrier Endeavour, watching the Zalthari fleet approach. She had spent every moment since the first contact preparing for this day. Her forces were outnumbered in terms of firepower, but she had advantages that Vexthar could not imagine. Human military doctrine was aggressive and adaptable. Her captains were trained to think independently and take risks. Vexthar opened a communication channel. His image appeared on screens across the human fleet. He said that resistance was foolish, and that humanity should surrender now to avoid destruction. The general expected fear, but instead he saw something else in the human's eyes. It looked like anger mixed with determination. Lisa Grant responded calmly. She told Vexthar that humanity bowed to no one. The Dominion had demanded tribute from a free people, and that was their first mistake. Coming here with warships was their second. She gave him 1 chance to leave peacefully. Vexthar laughed and said he would make an example of humanity. The general ordered an attack on Europa, where humans had established a mining colony. 15 Zalthari cruisers broke formation and headed toward Jupiter's moon. Vexthar wanted to show humanity what happened to those who defied the Dominion. He expected the humans to watch helplessly while their colony burned. Commander Jake Morrison had been waiting for exactly this move. His battle group of 12 ships intercepted the Zalthari force near Jupiter's orbit. The first space battle between humans and aliens began with missiles filling the void. Explosions lit up the darkness as both sides opened fire. The Zalthari ships had powerful energy shields and advanced weapons. Their tactics were based on 3,000 years of military experience. They moved in perfect formation, firing in coordinated volleys. It was textbook warfare practiced by a civilization that had mastered the art of conquest. Then they discovered that humans did not read textbooks. Jake's ships scattered in all directions, firing from multiple angles. They used the gravity of Jupiter's moons to slingshot around obstacles. Human captains targeted specific systems on enemy ships rather than trying to overwhelm their shields. They were unpredictable and aggressive. Captain Henry Walsh commanded the frigate Dallas. His ship took heavy damage from a Zalthari cruiser's main cannon. His crew reported that engines were failing and shields were down. Most commanders would retreat, but Henry saw an opportunity. He ordered maximum thrust directly toward the enemy cruiser. The Zalthari captain realized too late what was happening. Henry's ship crashed into the cruiser's bridge section at full speed. The impact destroyed both vessels instantly. Henry's last transmission was heard across the entire human fleet. He said that the Zalthari wanted tribute, and humanity would give them fire. The word spread like electricity through every human ship. Captains who had been holding back suddenly fought with renewed fury. They rammed damaged ships into enemy vessels and used nuclear missiles at point-blank range. They employed tactics that seemed suicidal but were devastatingly effective. Lieutenant Amy Preston watched from the Defiance as the battle raged around her. She saw human ships breaking apart under enemy fire, but taking Zalthari vessels with them. She saw crews fighting until their last breath. The aliens had superior technology, but humans had something more important. They had the will to do whatever it took to win. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, both sides had suffered terrible losses. 20 human ships were destroyed and 8 more were heavily damaged. The Zalthari lost 9 cruisers, including their command ship. For General Vexthar, this was unthinkable. His forces had never taken such losses against a new species. Vexthar ordered a retreat. His fleet pulled back beyond Jupiter's orbit to regroup. He was confused and angry. The humans fought like creatures possessed. They showed no fear of death and no respect for military convention. They were dangerous in a way he had never encountered. The general sent a priority message to the Dominion Council. He reported that humanity was far more hostile than expected. Their military tactics were chaotic but effective. He requested a full conquest fleet to properly subdue them. The council approved his request and ordered him to return to Dominion space to gather reinforcements. On Earth, celebrations mixed with mourning. Humanity had won its first battle, but the cost was high. Thousands of crew members had died defending Europa. Admiral Lisa Grant attended memorial services for the fallen. She stood before crowds of families and promised that their loved ones had not died in vain. At the same time, Commander Brandon Cole was preparing for his classified mission. He had assembled a team of 12 elite operators. Each one was a specialist in different skills. Lieutenant Amy Preston transferred from the Defiance to join his team because of her language and medical expertise. Sergeant Carl Dixon was a demolitions expert who could blow up anything. Corporal Nina Hayes was a genius with computer systems and could hack alien technology. Brandon briefed his team in a secure facility. He showed them intelligence gathered from captured Zalthari equipment. The Dominion was massive and controlled dozens of star systems. Their military was spread across hundreds of worlds maintaining order. Brandon's mission was to penetrate deep into enemy territory and gather critical intelligence. They would use a captured Zalthari scout ship that Nina had modified. The ship's identification codes would make them appear as a Dominion patrol vessel. They would travel to Zalthari home space and infiltrate their command networks. The mission was extremely dangerous and success was far from guaranteed. Amy asked what they should do if they were caught. Brandon's answer was simple. They would fight until they could not fight anymore. There was no extraction plan, because stealth was their only protection. Every member of the team understood and accepted the risk. The modified scout ship launched 3 days after the Battle of Jupiter. It slipped away from Earth under the cover of a supply convoy, and then disappeared into deep space. The journey to Zalthari territory would take several weeks. During that time, the team studied everything known about the Dominion. Back on Earth, the military buildup continued. Shipyards worked around the clock. New weapons were tested and deployed. Volunteers continued flooding recruitment centers. Humanity knew that the Zalthari would return in greater numbers. The next battle would be even harder. Admiral Lisa Grant met with her senior commanders. They discussed defensive strategies and offensive options. Some suggested pulling back and fortifying the solar system. Others wanted to take the fight to the enemy. Lisa listened to all opinions and then made her decision. Humanity would not wait passively for the next attack. They would strike at Zalthari supply lines and force the enemy to spread their forces thin. It was a risky strategy, but sitting behind defenses would only delay the inevitable. The best defense was a strong offense. Commander Jake Morrison received new orders. His battle group would lead raids into Dominion space targeting logistics and supply depots. Other groups would hit different targets simultaneously. The goal was to disrupt Zalthari operations and buy time for Earth to strengthen its defenses. Jake gathered his surviving crew and explained the mission. They would be operating far from home with no support. The risks were enormous, but so were the potential rewards. If they could damage Zalthari infrastructure, it might force the Dominion to reconsider the cost of conquering humanity. Lieutenant Amy Preston's replacement on the Defiance was a young officer named Katie Mills. She was nervous but determined to prove herself. Jake told her that fear was natural, but courage meant acting despite fear. Katie took her position and prepared for the dangerous mission ahead. General Vexthar reached Dominion space and began assembling his invasion fleet. He requested 800 warships and 500,000 soldiers. The Council approved everything. They had decided that humanity represented a threat to Dominion authority. If one species could refuse tribute, others might follow. Humanity had to be crushed completely. The stage was set for a larger conflict. Humanity prepared to strike deep into enemy territory while the Zalthari gathered an overwhelming force. Both sides were committed to total war. Only one could emerge victorious, and neither was willing to surrender. Commander Brandon Cole's team traveled through Zalthari space using the stolen scout ship. They had been moving carefully for 3 weeks, avoiding major shipping lanes and military patrols. The ship's fake identification codes worked perfectly. Every time they were scanned by Dominion vessels, they appeared as a legitimate patrol craft. Nina Hayes sat at the pilot controls studying navigation charts. She had learned to read Zalthari star maps and could now navigate their territory. The team discovered that the Dominion was even larger than initial estimates suggested. They controlled 40 star systems and ruled over hundreds of conquered species. Lieutenant Amy Preston studied the intelligence they had gathered. She found something interesting in the Zalthari communication intercepts. Many of the tributary species were not happy under Dominion rule. They paid tribute out of fear, not loyalty. Some planets had underground resistance movements. Amy shared this information with Brandon, who saw potential opportunities. Sergeant Carl Dixon spent his time preparing equipment for whatever situations they might face. He had brought enough explosives to level a small city. Carl was a big man from Oklahoma with a talent for destruction. He checked each charge carefully, making sure everything was ready. The team's target was a Zalthari command station orbiting their homeworld of Zalth Prime. The station coordinated military operations across multiple sectors. If they could infiltrate it and access the computer networks, they would gain invaluable intelligence. It was the most dangerous target they could have chosen, but also the most valuable. They approached Zalth Prime slowly. The planet was impressive, with massive cities covering entire continents. Hundreds of ships moved in orbit around the world. Defense platforms watched every approach vector. The command station hung in high orbit like a metal fortress. Brandon reviewed the infiltration plan one more time. They would dock at the station, claiming to have important intelligence about human activities. Once inside, Nina would hack into the computer systems while the rest of the team provided security. They had maybe 30 minutes before someone discovered they were imposters. The scout ship requested docking permission. The station's traffic controller approved the request without suspicion. They guided the ship into a small hangar bay. Brandon and his team wore captured Zalthari armor that had been modified to fit human bodies. The disguises would not hold up under close inspection, but might buy them precious time. They left the ship and moved through the station's corridors. The interior was designed for creatures larger than humans. Ceilings were high and doorways were wide. Zalthari soldiers and technicians moved past them without a second glance. The armor and confident movement sold the deception. Nina led them to a computer access terminal in a maintenance section. She connected her equipment and began the hack. Her fingers moved rapidly across the keyboard. The Zalthari security systems were sophisticated, but Nina had been studying their code structure for weeks. She found a vulnerability and exploited it. Data began flowing into her portable storage units. Fleet positions, supply routes, communication protocols, and strategic plans appeared on her screen. Nina saw the full scale of the invasion force being assembled to attack Earth. 800 warships with 500,000 soldiers. The information was terrifying but necessary. Brandon watched the corridor while Nina worked. Amy stood at another intersection monitoring their escape route. Carl positioned himself near a junction box ready to cause a distraction if needed. The minutes ticked by slowly. They had been inside the station for 20 minutes. Then alarms began screaming through the corridors. Red lights flashed and automated voices announced a security breach in multiple languages. Someone had discovered their intrusion. Brandon cursed and told Nina to finish quickly. She said she needed 2 more minutes to complete the download. Zalthari security forces appeared at both ends of the corridor. They were heavily armed and wore combat armor. Brandon and his team opened fire immediately. The sound of gunfire echoed through the metal passages. The Zalthari had energy weapons, but human bullets were just as deadly at close range. Amy threw a grenade around the corner, and the explosion cleared one group of enemies. Carl detonated charges he had planted at key structural points. The explosions caused chaos and confusion. Nina grabbed her equipment as the last files finished downloading. She shouted that she had everything they needed. The team fought their way back toward the hangar. More Zalthari soldiers poured into the corridors. Brandon shot 2 attackers and pushed forward. Amy was hit by an energy blast that burned through her armor and scorched her shoulder. She kept fighting despite the pain. They reached the hangar to find 20 Zalthari soldiers waiting near their ship. Carl pulled out his largest explosive charge and threw it into the middle of the enemy formation. The blast killed half of them instantly. Brandon and the others rushed through the smoke and confusion. Amy stumbled and nearly fell. Brandon caught her and helped her toward the ship. Zalthari weapons fire filled the air around them. They reached the scout ship and scrambled aboard. Nina started the engines immediately. The ship lifted off even as soldiers fired at it from below. They blasted out of the hangar and into open space. Dozens of Zalthari fighters launched in pursuit. The command station's defense weapons locked onto their ship. Nina pushed the engines to maximum and began evasive maneuvers. Energy beams and missiles filled the space around them. Brandon made a desperate decision. He told Carl to prepare the ship's reactor for overload. They would detonate it near a Zalthari supply depot they had identified earlier. The explosion would destroy enemy ships and allow the team to escape in emergency pods. It was their only chance. Carl worked quickly connecting his explosives to the reactor. Nina flew the ship toward the supply depot with enemy fighters close behind. The station ahead was huge with dozens of freighters docked. Amy treated her wound with medical supplies while watching their approach. They reached the depot and Nina set the autopilot for a collision course. Brandon ordered everyone to the escape pods. The team piled in 4 persons per pod. Brandon was the last one in. He activated the launch sequence and the pod shot away from the doomed ship at high speed. The scout ship crashed into the supply depot. Carl's modifications caused the reactor to detonate with massive force. The explosion vaporized the depot and dozens of nearby ships. The pursuing Zalthari fighters were caught in the blast wave. Only the escape pods were far enough away to survive. The pods drifted in space, broadcasting distress signals. Brandon hoped that someone friendly would find them before the Zalthari did.
Amy was losing blood from her wound.
Nina used the pod's limited medical supplies to stabilize her. They floated in the darkness, waiting and wondering if they would survive. Hours passed slowly. Then a small freighter approached their pods. The ship's design was unfamiliar and did not match Zalthari patterns. A communication came through in broken English. The voice said they had seen the explosion and came to investigate. They were members of a species called the Thexians who served as tributary to the Dominion. Brandon was cautious. This could be a trap, but they had no other options. He responded and identified himself as human. There was a long pause. Then the Thexian captain said that he had heard about humanity. He said that his people watched the news of human resistance with great interest. No one had defied the Dominion successfully in living memory. The freighter collected all the escape pods and brought the team aboard. The captain introduced himself, but his name was difficult for humans to pronounce. He told them to call him Swift Trader. He was a merchant who traveled throughout Dominion space and knew all the hidden routes. Swift Trader looked at the wounded Amy and immediately provided medical assistance. His ship had basic medical equipment. He told Brandon that he would take them back to human space. When Brandon asked what payment he wanted, Swift Trader refused any money. He said that humanity was giving hope to all the species trapped under Dominion rule. The merchant explained that many conquered civilizations secretly supported humanity. They wanted to see the Zalthari humbled. For 3,000 years, the Dominion had ruled through fear and force. Now one species was fighting back and winning battles. It gave others courage to imagine freedom. Brandon asked Swift Trader about the Thexian people. The merchant said they had been conquered 400 years ago. They paid heavy tribute and lived under constant surveillance. Some Thexians had formed resistance groups, but without weapons or support, they could do little. He hoped that humanity's war would change things. The journey back to human space took 10 days. During that time, Amy recovered from her wound. Nina organized all the intelligence they had stolen. The data was worth more than gold. It contained everything Earth needed to know about Zalthari military capabilities and weaknesses. Brandon spent time talking with Swift Trader, learning about life under Dominion rule. The stories were disturbing. The Zalthari took resources and gave nothing back. They suppressed technology to keep tributary species dependent. They enforced loyalty through fear and public executions. It was a brutal system. When they reached human territory, Swift Trader refused to come further. He said that being seen helping humans would endanger his crew. Brandon understood and thanked him for the rescue. Before parting, the human offensive began exactly on schedule. Across 20 different systems, strike teams launched simultaneous attacks on Zalthari infrastructure. Admiral Lisa Grant watched from Earth as reports flooded in. The strategy was simple but brutal. Hit the enemy where they were weakest and disappear before reinforcements arrived. Commander Jake Morrison led his battle group toward a fuel refinery on the edge of Dominion space. The facility processed exotic matter used in faster-than-light engines. Destroying it would cripple Zalthari fleet operations for months. His 12 ships approached the target system, carefully avoiding sensor networks. The refinery orbited a gas giant with minimal defenses. The Zalthari had grown comfortable after 3,000 years of unchallenged rule. They never expected anyone to attack so deep in their territory. Jake's ships came out of faster-than-light travel, already firing missiles. The refinery's shields activated, but human weapons were designed to overwhelm defensive systems through sheer volume. Hundreds of missiles impacted within seconds. The facility's structure began breaking apart. Secondary explosions rippled through the complex as fuel reserves ignited. Jake ordered his ships to retreat before enemy reinforcements could arrive. Meanwhile, Commander Brandon Cole led his team to a world called Kelvar. The planet was home to a species called the Kelvins, who had been conquered by the Zalthari 200 years ago. Intelligence suggested that the Kelvins had an active resistance movement. Brandon's mission was to destroy the Zalthari military garrison and make contact with local rebels. The team landed their shuttle in a remote mountain region. The Kelvin landscape was beautiful with purple vegetation and orange skies. Brandon and his operators moved toward the garrison under cover of darkness. Lieutenant Amy Preston had fully recovered from her wound and moved with the confidence of a veteran soldier. Sergeant Carl Dixon placed explosive charges on the garrison's power generator and communication array. Corporal Nina Hayes hacked into their security systems and disabled the alarm network. Brandon and the rest of the team positioned themselves for the assault. At his signal, they attacked. The surprise was total. Zalthari soldiers stumbled out of their barracks only to be cut down by human weapons. Carl's explosives destroyed the power grid, plunging the base into darkness. The battle was over in 15 minutes. Not a single Zalthari survived, and the humans took no casualties. Local Kelvin civilians witnessed the attack from nearby settlements. They had never seen anyone successfully fight the Zalthari. Word spread quickly through underground networks. By morning, Brandon's team was contacted by Kelvan resistance leaders who wanted to meet. The resistance fighters were cautious at first. They had heard stories about humans, but seeing them in person was different. Brandon explained that humanity was fighting the Dominion and wanted to help others do the same. He offered captured Zalthari weapons and tactical training. The Kelvin leaders accepted eagerly. Over the next week, Brandon's team trained 300 Kelvin fighters. They taught guerrilla tactics and sabotage techniques. Amy provided medical training while Carl showed them how to make improvised explosives. The Kelvins learned quickly, and their hatred for the Zalthari made them fierce students. On another front, Captain Ryan Tucker led a squadron of 50 human fighters in a raid against a Zalthari shipyard. The facility was constructing new warships for the invasion fleet. Ryan was a young pilot from California with exceptional reflexes and nerves of steel. His squadron approached the target from multiple vectors. The shipyard's defenses were formidable with automated gun platforms and patrol fighters. Ryan's pilots weaved through the defensive fire with practiced skill. They launched missiles at ships under construction and strafed the construction platforms. Explosions bloomed across the facility as partially built warships broke apart. Zalthari fighters scrambled to intercept, but the human pilots were already retreating. Ryan lost 3 fighters, but the damage to the shipyard was catastrophic. It would take months to repair, and dozens of new warships would never be completed. He reported success, and his squadron vanished into deep space. The most dramatic action occurred near the Zalthari invasion fleet itself. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Blake led a suicide mission against the fleet as it prepared for faster-than-light travel to Earth. She commanded a squadron of 20 bombers loaded with nuclear warheads. Everyone knew this would be a one-way trip. Sarah was 35 years old and had been flying combat missions for 10 years. She volunteered for this mission because her brother had died at the Battle of Jupiter. She wanted the Zalthari to pay for every human life they had taken. Her squadron approached the massive fleet hiding among debris fields and using every stealth technique available. The invasion fleet numbered 800 ships arranged in formation. General Vexthar's command ship sat at the center. Sarah identified her target and ordered the attack. Her bombers accelerated to maximum speed on direct collision courses with enemy vessels. The Zalthari detected them too late. Point defense weapons destroyed half the bombers, but the rest reached their targets. Nuclear explosions tore through the fleet. Sarah's bomber crashed directly into the bridge of Vexthar's flagship. The general died instantly along with his entire command staff. The invasion fleet fell into chaos. Without central coordination, ships collided with each other. Multiple vessels were destroyed or damaged. The faster-than-light jump was aborted. Sarah Blake and her squadron were gone, but they had bought Earth precious time. The invasion would be delayed by weeks while the Zalthari reorganized their command structure. Across Dominion space, the human attacks continued. Supply depots burned. Communication stations went dark. Transport ships disappeared. The Zalthari military struggled to respond. Every time they sent forces to one location, humans would strike somewhere else. It was like fighting shadows. Back on Kelver, Brandon Cole witnessed something remarkable. The Kelvin resistance launched their own uprising. Armed with captured weapons and human training, they attacked Zalthari occupation forces throughout the planet. Within days, the entire world was in open rebellion. Brandon received urgent communication from Earth. Similar uprisings were occurring on 3 other tributary worlds. The sight of humans successfully fighting the Dominion had inspired conquered species everywhere. Admiral Lisa Grant wanted to know if Brandon could support these rebellions. He said his team would do everything possible. The Zalthari Dominion Council met in emergency session. They faced a crisis unlike anything in their history. The invasion fleet was crippled. Supply lines were burning. Tributary worlds were rebelling. And at the center of it all was humanity. A species they had dismissed as primitive was tearing their empire apart. Some council members argued for immediate peace negotiations. Others demanded total war until humanity was exterminated. The debate raged for hours. Finally, they reached a compromise. They would send an envoy to propose a ceasefire while simultaneously preparing for one final massive assault. If humanity refused peace, they would be destroyed regardless of cost. President Linda Foster received the Zalthari peace offer with suspicion. She convened her cabinet and military advisors. Admiral Lisa Grant argued for continuing the offensive. They had the Dominion on the defensive and should press the advantage. Secretary of Defense Patrick Monroe worried about the cost of continued war. Brandon Cole was called back to Earth for the strategy meeting. He arrived with Lieutenant Amy Preston, who had become his most trusted advisor. Brandon told the president that the Dominion was weaker than they appeared. The tributary species were ready to break free. If humanity kept fighting, the entire Dominion structure might collapse. But there was troubling intelligence. Nina Hayes had intercepted Zalthari military communications. A hardline faction within their military was planning a rogue attack on Earth. They wanted to strike before any peace treaty could be signed. The attack would be led by General Zexthor, who was the brother of the dead Vexthar. He wanted revenge. The threat was serious. Zexthor commanded a battle fleet of 300 ships and was willing to act without council approval. He believed that destroying Earth would end human resistance and restore Dominion authority. His fleet was already moving toward human space. President Foster made her decision. Humanity would attend peace negotiations but also prepare to stop Zexthor's fleet. Brandon Cole would lead a volunteer force to intercept the rogue Zalthari. It would be humanity's most dangerous mission yet. Brandon put out a call for volunteers. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of veterans wanted to join the mission. He selected 100 of the best operators from Special Forces units across Earth. Lieutenant Amy Preston, Sergeant Carl Dixon, and Corporal Nina Hayes all volunteered immediately. The volunteer force also received unexpected support. Swift Trader contacted Earth with an offer. He had organized a coalition of merchant ships from multiple tributary species. They would provide intelligence and support to help stop Zexthor. Other conquered species were watching and hoping humanity would succeed. Brandon's force assembled quickly. They would use a combination of stealth ships and conventional warships. The strategy was to ambush Zexthor's fleet in deep space before it could reach Earth. It would be a desperate battle with the survival of humanity at stake. Admiral Lisa Grant Gay. Commander Brandon Cole's volunteer force moved through deep space tracking General Zexthar's rogue fleet. Intelligence from Swift Trader and his coalition proved invaluable. The merchant ships monitored Zalthari communications and provided real-time updates on enemy positions. Brandon had 100 special operators and 20 warships against 300 enemy vessels. The odds were terrible, but humanity had faced worse. Lieutenant Amy Preston coordinated with the tributary species allies. She discovered that several of them had military experience from before their conquest. They shared tactical information about Zalthari fleet formations and command protocols. The aliens were taking enormous risks by helping humans. If Zexthar won, they would all be executed as traitors. Sergeant Carl Dixon prepared special weapons for the coming battle. He had designed massive explosive charges that could be delivered by small, fast-moving craft. The plan was to use hit-and-run tactics to whittle down the enemy fleet before the main engagement. Nina Hayes worked on electronic warfare systems to disrupt Zalthari communications and targeting. Zexthar's fleet traveled in tight formation, confident in their numerical superiority. The general broadcast messages throughout his ships promising that humanity would burn for killing his brother. His crews were motivated by revenge and belief in Dominion supremacy. They expected to reach Earth within 5 days and destroy the human homeworld. Brandon chose his ambush point carefully. There was a debris field from an ancient stellar collision between two systems. The area was filled with asteroids and radiation that would interfere with sensors. His ships hid among the rocks, waiting for the enemy to arrive. Swift Trader's scouts confirmed that Zexthar was approaching. The Zalthari fleet entered the debris field without caution. They had no reason to expect an attack so far from human territory. Brandon waited until they were deep in the field and then gave the order. 20 small craft launched from hiding, loaded with Carl's explosive charges. They accelerated toward the enemy formation at maximum speed. The Zalthari detected them and opened fire. But the small craft were difficult targets among the asteroids. Half of them were destroyed, but the rest reached enemy ships and detonated. Massive explosions tore through the fleet. 15 Zalthari vessels were destroyed or crippled in the first minute of battle. Brandon's warships emerged from hiding and attacked from multiple directions. They fired everything they had and then retreated back into the debris field. The Zalthari tried to pursue, but human ships knew the terrain better. They used asteroids for cover and led enemy vessels into ambush zones. General Zexthar realized he was facing a trap. He ordered his fleet to reform and fight defensively, but his ships were scattered and confused. Human attacks came from unexpected angles. Explosions lit up the darkness as both sides exchanged fire. The battle became a chaotic melee with ships fighting at close range. Amy Preston commanded a medical ship that moved through the battlefield recovering damaged human craft and wounded crew. She pulled 3 pilots from wrecked fighters and stabilized them under fire. Her ship took damage, but she refused to retreat. Every human life was precious, and she would not abandon anyone. Carl Dixon flew one of the explosive-laden craft himself. He targeted a Zalthari carrier and crashed his ship into its hangar bay. The explosion triggered secondary detonations throughout the vessel. The carrier broke apart, taking 2 escort ships with it. Carl ejected in an escape pod seconds before impact. Nina Hayes hacked into Zalthari communication networks and broadcast false orders. Enemy ships received contradictory commands and began moving out of formation. Some turned to attack targets that did not exist. Others held position waiting for clarification. The confusion multiplied as Zexthar tried to regain control of his fleet. The battle raged for 6 hours. Human ships fought with desperate courage, knowing that Earth's survival depended on them. They used every trick and tactic ever devised. When missiles ran out, they used kinetic rounds. When those were gone, some ships rammed enemy vessels. Brandon's flagship engaged Zexthar's command ship directly. The 2 vessels circled each other, trading fire. Brandon knew that killing the general might end the battle. He ordered maximum power to weapons even as his shields failed. Enemy fire tore through his ship's hull, killing crew members around him. Zexthar contacted Brandon, demanding to know why humans fought with such fury. Brandon's response was transmitted across all channels. He said that humanity had been asked to kneel and surrender their freedom. He said that humans would never bow to tyrants. He told Zexthar to remember this moment and understand that some things were worth more than life itself. Brandon ordered his damaged ship on a collision course with Zexthar's flagship. The crew evacuated in escape pods while he remained at the controls. His ship accelerated toward the enemy vessel. Zexthar tried to evade, but Brandon anticipated every maneuver. The ships collided in a massive explosion that lit up the entire battlefield. Both vessels were destroyed instantly. Brandon's escape pod launched automatically at the last second, throwing him clear of the explosion. He was unconscious from the impact, but alive. Amy's medical ship recovered his pod along with dozens of others. The volunteer force had paid a terrible price but achieved their objective. With Zexthar dead, the rogue fleet lost cohesion. Many ships surrendered immediately. Others tried to flee but were destroyed by Swift Traders' coalition, who had been waiting at the edge of the battlefield. Within an hour, the battle was over. Humanity had won, but the cost was devastating. Of the 20 human warships, only 7 survived. Of the 100 special operators, 43 were dead and 30 more wounded. But they had stopped the attack on Earth. The homeworld was safe. News of the victory spread quickly through both human and Zalthari space. The Zalthari Dominion Council was shocked by the defeat of Zexthar's fleet. The hardline faction lost all credibility. Council members who favored peace gained the majority. They sent an envoy to human space with authority to negotiate a formal treaty. The war was effectively over. President Linda Foster met with the Zalthari ambassador at a neutral station. The negotiations took 3 weeks. The Zalthari wanted reparations for destroyed facilities. Ambassador Peter Cross, who led the human delegation, refused flatly. He said that the Dominion had started the war by demanding tribute. Humanity owed them nothing. The final treaty recognized human sovereignty over all human-controlled systems. It established borders between human and Zalthari space. Most importantly, it included provisions allowing tributary species to petition for independence. Humanity promised to support any species that chose freedom. Brandon Cole recovered from his injuries over several months. He received more medals than he could count, but refused all promotion offers. He told Admiral Lisa Grant that he wanted to train the next generation of soldiers. She approved his request and gave him command of the Special Operations Training Facility. Jake Morrison was promoted to Admiral and given command of Earth's expanding fleet. New ships were being built every day. Humanity was no longer content to stay in their small corner of space. They would explore and defend freedom wherever they found it. Amy Preston became the director of medical services for the United Defense Fleet. She had saved hundreds of lives during the war, and her innovations in combat medicine became standard throughout human forces. She continued working with alien species, sharing medical knowledge and building friendships. 3 months after the treaty signing, a ceremony was held at Arlington Memorial on Earth. The memorial had been expanded to include walls, inscribed with thousands of names. Every person who died defending humanity's freedom was honored there. Brandon attended despite still recovering from his wounds. President Foster gave a speech that was broadcast across known space. She spoke about the price of freedom and the courage of those who fought. She said that humanity had proven something important to the galaxy. No empire, no matter how powerful, could break the will of free people. She promised that Earth would stand with all species seeking liberty. Swift Trader attended the ceremony as an honored guest. He brought representatives from 6 tributary species that had declared independence since the war ended. The Kelvins sent a delegation led by the resistance fighters Brandon had trained. They presented him with a medal made from metal, salvaged from destroyed Zalthari weapons. The ceremony concluded with a moment of silence for the fallen. Then military jets flew overhead in missing man formation. The crowd dispersed slowly, each person taking time to read names on the memorial walls. Brandon stood alone before a section listing his team members who had died. He placed flowers and whispered a promise that their sacrifice would not be forgotten. 10 years later, the galaxy had transformed. The Zalthari Dominion controlled only half its former territory. 20 species had gained independence and formed a loose alliance with humanity at its heart. Earth had become a symbol of resistance against tyranny. Young aliens studied human history and tactics in their military academies. Brandon Cole retired from active service but continued training special forces. His students came from dozens of worlds, all learning how to fight for freedom. Admiral Jake Morrison commanded the United Species Defense Coalition, protecting free worlds from aggression. On Kelvar, a monument stood in the capital city.